Welcome everyone to today's session. Wherever you are joining us around the world, it's great to be up with you and having a bit of a discussion with you about safety culture and introducing some of the ways that we work with our clients around the world to measure and build sustainable safety cultures and measure their impact. So today, what I'll be looking to talk you through is a bit of background and context as to who we are, what we're trying to achieve at Safe 365 with our clients around the world. I'll introduce to you some of the frameworks, the tools, the technology that we use to help support clients to measure safety culture and sustainably build that safety culture over time, leveraging the resources, the expertise that they have within their teams to make sure that a safety culture program doesn't become a short-term initiative. It becomes a long-term, sustainable, continuous improvement mechanism that's used within all businesses and business units. And finally, we'll talk to you about how we measure impact in that regard, both leading and lagging indicators being brought together so that you can share a really strong and compelling narrative to your senior leadership teams, your boards, your shareholders, and the community. Because safety culture is obviously a really critical enabler for businesses to demonstrate that they are creating a culture that cares for their employees, their customers, and their communities. So without further ado, I'll just start jumping through just a couple of slides to introduce ourselves and who we are. And when we talk about Safe 365, we are fundamentally a technology company. We provide technology and services focused on measuring, monitoring, benchmarking, and improving safety culture and performance within our customers' organisations. We've been around for about 10 years, started out of New Zealand, and we've now grown around the world to be working with more than 9,000 companies across 47 countries. And what's really interesting, particularly for those on the call today, is that our approach is industry agnostic. We certainly have some real strengths and we enjoy some really strong and powerful relationships with companies in particular sectors, which we'll talk about today in some of our case studies. But we work across all sectors. And the reason we do that is because our technology is consistent, scalable, and it can be applied across all sorts of contexts globally. And I'll talk to you about some of the strengths of that approach and why we've developed our frameworks and technology to undertake it in that way as we go through tonight. But in terms of our mission, what we're trying to achieve is, as a purpose-driven organisation, we believe that all employees should deserve to work in at least a proactive risk environment. So we want to work in environments where we not only have the systems, policies, processes in place to effectively manage risks, but we want to make sure that we have all of the attitudes, leadership, engagement, behaviors, cultures all aligned so that we're not only responding to incidents when they do occur, but we've got all of those right practices in place to try to prevent poor safety outcomes from manifesting and occurring. And that's something that we believe is a right for all employees around the world. And that's really where we work with clients and we work with safety leaders who are really committed to achieving that cause as well and committed to trying to be the best that they can be in terms of their safety performance. So our goal is to try to provide that support to more than 100 million employees around the world. And we've certainly made significant inroads in that regard. So what we really aim to do when we're partnering with leading organisations through our safety culture program, which we'll be talking to you about, is we try to support them to achieve a whole range of different objectives. And these are just some of the objectives that we find leading organisations come and talk to us about. So firstly, in a lot of cases, they're trying to enhance safety culture across complex supply chains. Because as we all know, particularly for enterprise clients in complex industries, in high reliability industries, the performance and the safety of your supply chain is indelibly linked with the performance of your organization. It affects your employees, it affects your operational efficiency, and it affects your profitability. So that's one of the areas where we certainly have found a niche purely because of the sustainability and the scalability of our approach, that we really have an advantage to be able to support people to better understand their supply chains beyond a fundamental pre-qualification process. Secondly, we also support businesses to better communicate and engage with their leaders. I'm sure many of you will realise, and some of you can relate to my experience in that when I look back on how I used to present a lot of data to leaders regarding safety, it was an awful lot of data. There was a lot of dense, particularly lagging indicators and lagging data and performance data. And what we really found, what we find with our clients is, in a lot of cases, we're actually simplifying the complex. And that's one of the things that we will talk about today, how we simplify this complex construct, which we call safety culture, and we provide that in a very simple narrative to senior leaders, boards, governance groups. It makes it very easy for them to understand, and it acts effectively as a barometer. It allows them to be able to ask the right questions, monitor performance, and understand where they should be investing their time, resources, and focus to get the best outcomes from a holistic safety perspective. So that's a real focus that we work on. Thirdly, we find our program also helps build relationships with workers. The nature of our program and how we measure safety culture and how we engage with workers across the business inherently builds more trusted relationships. It builds strategic alignment, and it makes sure that workers understand that there is a commitment to trying to improve safety culture for the benefit of not only the organisation, but for their workers as well. And as part of that process to try to improve safety culture, we very much are committed to supporting high performance in safety beyond compliance. I'll talk a little bit more about compliance and the role of compliance when we talk about safety culture frameworks and where we see the data is anchoring a lot of organisations in some cases to a minimum compliance standard, which is fundamentally the floor of where we should be seeing good performance, not at the higher end of performance. So we think there is a lot of value and benefits that are provided to an organisation that goes well above and beyond minimum compliance standards. And finally, we obviously work really closely with organisations using the data that we collect through our technology to help inform continual improvement processes. So these could be strategies, safety improvement plans, and we help organisations align their whole business and all of their business units to focus on the things that matter most within their organisation, and then monitor and report on how that is changing and whether it is improving over time. So there's some of the real benefits and some of the rationale for why clients really work with us at Safe 365. And we are very fortunate to have a large suite of larger organisations and leading organisations. But more so, we have a lot of leading safety practitioners that partner with us around the world. These are the people in the sector who really understand the value and the benefit of good data to drive better decisions and to drive continuous improvement and to better engage with their leadership team. So we're very pleased and proud of the relationships that we have and we share across our customers around the world to be able to try to support them and their teams to build the safety culture that they really hope for as part of their organisation. So fundamentally, I just thought it would be worthwhile just setting a basic construct for everyone around what we are trying to achieve in a very simple way, which goes to this narrative that I was just talking about that you can use to engage with your senior leadership team. So at Safe 365, we very much focus on measuring safety culture. And in that regard, on this diagram that you can see on the screen here, we're able to measure and monitor the safety culture of your organisation or different parts of your organisation and monitor that performance over time. What we're aiming to achieve by doing that is obviously over time to see that safety culture index, or safety culture maturity index, as we call it, increase over time. What we know from our clients and the data is that as that safety culture maturity index increases, we see poor safety outcomes decrease. And that's a really a consistent relationship that we see across our clients and well founded in the literature. So, really, what we're focusing on is improving that safety performance, reducing that workplace harm, but also recognizing that whilst that might sound very simple and really basic for what all safety professionals are trying to achieve in their day-to-day role, what we also help businesses do is to make sure that we're positioning this narrative in the right way to try to engage with their leadership teams. So, really drawing it to not only that reduction in harm and the moral imperative, but also getting to the commercial imperatives around improving business performance, building a stronger brand and ESG positioning, achieving better commercial outcomes through that process. And like I was talking about before, trying to set the expectation amongst leaders and workers that we could and should be performing well above minimum compliance standards. So that's really what we are aiming to achieve through our program and our process. And just to demonstrate a couple of quick case studies as to what this looks like in practice. At Heathrow Airport, which was one of our first major clients in the UK many years ago, we've worked with them not only on the airport team themselves, but also across the airport supply chain. So as you can appreciate, airports are very large, complex enterprises and organisations, and the amount of workers that are working at an airport and contributing to the safety culture that is experienced by all workers and passengers that are passing through there. They work for many, many dozens of organisations that are all contributing to the organisational supply chain. So in this case, what we saw from Heathrow was over 2 years, we saw sustainable, modest increases in safety culture maturity, a 5% increase. But that correlated to a 29% reduction in their lost time for injuries frequency rate. So similarly, for the Heathrow supply chain, a 3% increase in safety culture correlated to a 26% reduction in LTIs. We see similar case studies around the world as well. And in some cases, they've really been able to manifest those commercial benefits. So particularly for Southern Cross Healthcare in Australia, a large aged care provider, they were able to increase their safety culture quite substantially over a couple of years by 30%. They saw a reduction in harm of 34%, and they leveraged that reduction in harm to gain significant savings on their workers' compensation insurance premiums and payments. So, really important commercial aspects there. And similarly, for small businesses, which is something we're very passionate about with Safe 365, trying to make safety culture, expertise, and language, and a lot of the thinking about safety culture, which has really been unaffordable for many organisations over the last several decades as the profession has really been built out. We're able to make it available to smaller organisations at an achievable price as well. And in this case, in New Zealand, we worked with a national insurer across 600 small to medium-sized businesses, and they collectively saw an aggregate increase of 20% and a subsequent 34% reduction in claims as well. So they're just some examples of this playing out in practice. The increase in safety culture correlating to a reduction in poor safety outcomes. So probably really worth jumping into now a bit of the frameworks, the technology, the approach, and how we work with clients to measure safety culture. So what you can see on the screen here is a screenshot from our technology, which is a visualization of our safety culture maturity framework. We call it our starburst. In this starburst, We're trying to measure and conduct a maturity assessment that goes beyond the processes and the systems and the policies that exist within an organization, but also consider all those values, behaviors, leadership, and engagement practices that really bring all of that paper safety within an organization into practice. So we think it conducts a very holistic safety culture assessment of an organization. All of these are effectively leading indicators, and we've got 82 individual elements that we assess grouped across 10 modules. So these 10 modules that we're looking to investigate range across a whole range of factors like knowledge across different levels of the organization. So directors, managers, workers, and contractors. We also do assess your health and safety management systems and your verification and audit processes, as well as things like emergency preparedness, so critical to response in a health and safety context. We then look at health and safety data collection and the utilization of that data by management and reporting processes to make better decisions and drive continuous improvement. And really importantly, we really focus on frontline workers and their engagement between managers, leaders, and frontline workers, as well as broader cultures and behaviors. So these are all of the elements and the modules that we are conducting our assessment across. In the middle of that starburst, you can see that there is an index. That index is what we call our Safety Culture Maturity Index. And this index relates to a safety culture maturity framework, which is what you can see on the screen here. For the safety professionals that are interested and have studied some of this, it's very much based on Hudson's framework, which is a very common and fairly well understood framework across the sector and across leaders in many organizations. So we're trying to use the frameworks and the language that a lot of organizations and safety professionals are already familiar with. In case you're not familiar with Hudson's framework, though, I'll just talk through it so that you can orientate yourself on how it works and what good looks like for most organizations and what the averages are for many organizations that undertake this assessment. So what you can see is down the bottom end of the safety culture maturity framework, we have the lower levels of early days or a reactive safety culture. Reactive safety cultures are those that very fundamentally tend to respond more to poor safety outcomes and take action after the fact. They may have policies, processes, practices in place. They may have some elements of great leadership or engagement. It's not one thing or the other. All organizations' profile will be very unique to them and their context. But we know if the Safety Culture Maturity Index comes in below 39, it's very indicative of that reactive safety culture and posture. At the top end, where we see proactive or leading safety cultures, we're seeing safety culture maturity indexes that are above 60%. And conversely, for a proactive safety culture, we are seeing organizations that really do have great alignment, and not only across their policies, processes, and systems, we're starting to see great alignment across their behaviors, their values, their leadership practices. And that's where we start seeing a lot more of the indicative factors that contribute towards an organization working proactively to prevent a poor safety outcome before it occurs. I'll just draw your attention to the middle level here, though, which we call systematic. So this level between 40 and 59%. This is actually the most common level and the median level for most organizations when they conduct their initial baseline assessment within our programs. The reason here is that a systematic safety culture tends to commonly align to minimum compliance and regulatory standards. So it's not uncommon for organizations to potentially have, say, ISO 45001 accreditation. They have really good policies, processes, and systems. They might do good verification and audit processes, but they might not have invested as much time and resources and focus on some of those more holistic approaches regarding knowledge, engagement, cultures, and behaviors. So we typically see many organizations beginning their safety journey, their safety culture improvement journey with us within the systematic level. And that's for many common organizations. The results for our currently 3,000 organizations that we include in our current baselining data set is it's effectively a bell curve. So the majority of those organizations come in the middle, and then they move and progress up through their safety culture journey into proactive or leadership. So that's why we say on the right-hand side, many new start clients may actually fall into that 44, 50, or into the 40s or in the 50s as their initial baseline assessment, which is great. They have strong foundations here, and it puts them in a really good position to be able to build that continuous improvement journey into the proactive and leading safety cultures. So, part of what we were looking to talk about today was around continuous improvement, sustainability, and benchmarking. So what you're seeing on the screen here is a bit of an example of a report that's been produced for one of our clients that we've de-identified, but it gives you a bit of an idea of this client's journey. And we can draw out some of the key features that our program provides to organizations to track, monitor, and discuss how they are performing in terms of safety culture. So on the left-hand side of this screen, you can see that there is a baseline safety culture maturity index. In this case, it was done in March of 2023. For this particular organization, their initial baseline safety culture maturity index was 34%. We subsequently worked with this client, built out a strategy and a safety improvement plan. And you can see down on the left-hand side, these are the changes to their safety culture maturity index over time. You will notice it hasn't just jumped straight up. They've been undertaking steady, sustainable improvement activities over time. And as those sustainable activities are recognized and embedded in practice, we're able to recognize some of those improvements within our framework and our technology. And that's demonstrating a continuous, steady improvement in their safety culture maturity. Over the 2 years of implementing those plans and those programs, this particular organization grew from 34% up to 56%. They invested very heavily and focused on their knowledge practices, their behavior, culture and behavior practices, and their data collection practices, rather, as well as building out some of the relatively minor deficiencies in their health and safety management system. And all of that collectively has demonstrated a really strong, solid improvement journey and a narrative that they're able to talk to their leaders about. Furthermore, what we're also able to do for our clients is we're not only able to tell that story of what they look like and what good looks like to their leadership teams, we're able to talk about how they are performing in quite detailed elements or modules to their sector. And in this case, we're able to see for this client, their top performing modules were things like management knowledge, management reporting, and worker knowledge. And in this case, they were performing well and above their sector averages by 25 percentage points, 13 and 17 percentage points respectively. Conversely, at the bottom end of their modules, verification and audit, emergency preparedness, and worker engagement, they were below the sector average, but still in the single digits, 3, 2, and 4% respectively. So that in itself provides some assurance through to leaders, through to boards, that we are doing a lot of things really well. We know what we have opportunities to improve, and we have the plans in place and the assurance that the work is being done to improve. And that provides some really good governance and transparency processes through the practice. So that sort of demonstrates an idea of how this process can work at a single assessment level. But one of the things that our technology has been able to afford many organizations is the scalability. And I'd ask you to reflect on your safety culture that you might experience within your organization. And I'll ask you the question as to whether you think it is one single safety culture or if it is a collection of subcultures across the organization. I'm sure many of you are reflecting and saying, yes, there's subcultures. We know the divisions or the contractors or the parts of the organizations or the geography within the organization that may have a higher safety culture than others. The beauty of our approach is because we are technology based, we're very efficient in terms of how we're able to collect, analyze, and report on this data. We're able to scale our assessments so that we can undertake multiple assessments within an organization and demonstrate where those unique strengths and opportunities for improvement are within an organization. So for this particular case, you're able to see on the screen for one organization, they may have undertaken assessments across their warehouse team, their sales team, their engineering team, customer success, accounts, and procurement. And within that process, they're able to see where the strengths and opportunities for improvement are. Obviously, within our starbursts, you're able to very easily see green is higher performing, red are the opportunities for improvement, amber is generally reflecting that systematic sort of level or that tier 3 safety culture within our tier. And you're able to see very clearly what are the themes across these that a central team might be able to focus on to rise the tide across all business units. But we're also able to understand what are the particular unique priorities for each of these business units, and we can build out tailored continuous improvement plans that businesses are able to support them to implement. Very simple, sustainable initiatives typically, and they can undertake those over the year, and then we see a continuous sustainable improvement across each of those business units. So like I was saying, in terms of that scalable approach for safety culture, it's very much an approach that we're able to provide at scale across rather complex industries. And what you can see here is an example within the aviation sector, actually across a country, where they're able to scale the approach to assess all sorts of different business units and aggregate data together to understand what are the strategic themes that we might be needing to focus on across multiple contractors, providers, suppliers, divisions, or geographies. Very much a scalable approach that enables us to do really good quality data-driven strategy and safety improvement plans. So, most importantly, everything that I've been speaking to you about today, if I reflect back on our original discussion regarding the aim of what we're trying to achieve, improving safety culture and reducing poor safety outcomes, how are we able to simplify this into the reports and the narrative that we then share through to our boards and our senior leaders? We're very much able to rely on that safety culture maturity index to forecast and set the expectation for those leaders around what does good look like in terms of improvement for our safety culture maturity index. Like I was saying before, from our data set, we're able to say average improvements are around 5% per annum. Some organizations may invest more heavily and they may go above and beyond that, and some may experience other challenges with good reason that may see them go below that. But the average expectation that we can see from our lead indicator as our safety culture maturity index is approximately a 5 percentage point increase year on year. What we can then do is base that on and some of the data we have for lag indicators, and we can set some expectations around, okay, what's the reasonable expectation for a reduction in our lag indicators? Those lag indicators may be very different depending on the sector, the context, the organization. But we're really trying to understand what are those poor safety outcomes that we are trying to influence? What are those that are most important for the organization? And we can conduct some analysis to say, Well, this would be reasonable to expect for a low impact implementation of the program versus a high impact implementation of the program. Set that expectation and then monitor and report. Simplify the reporting back to the executive to say if you are seeing a 2 to 3% safety culture maturity index improvement at the 6-month mark of the year, at the 9-month mark of the year, at the annual review cycle, it's an ongoing dynamic reporting process, which isn't a bookended approach. We don't conduct an assessment and then say, thank you, we'll see you in 3 years' time, and we'll see how you go. You always have access to the technology, the supports, and the guidance to be able to improve your safety culture sustainably with the resources you have available to you. And like I say a few times, many of these interventions are simple, sustainable, and achievable for individual safety teams within their organisation to drive that improvement. So, like we were saying before, we also are able to provide all of this data for individual business units within an organisation, share the focuses of their strengths, provide some recognition for them around what they are doing well and what they could be focusing on to improve, how they are performing and comparing to their sector or their benchmark scores, and what does that look like moving forward. Very conscious of time, so I might just skip through one of those slides and really just spend a moment talking to you about benchmarking and really the power of the Safe 365 approach and the benchmarking data set that we have, which is unlike any other around the world. This is really a unique selling feature for Safe 365, where because we are industry agnostic, we have a very large data set. This was last year's data analysis where we had almost 2,700 organisations, and say now it's closer to 3,000 organisations that we are actively using the safety culture technology to measure, monitor, and report on their prevailing safety culture. And you can see on this diagram in the screen the size of the industry and their average safety culture maturity index. So construction, that very large bubble up the top of the screen, represents about 21% of our database. And we know that their safety culture maturity index average is around 53%. So like we were saying, from an expectation perspective, our framework and the way we measure safety culture for each of the elements is able to detect how mature you are for each individual element. And in this case, the overall aggregate for those organisations comes in around 53%. The higher performing sectors that we see, utilities, mining, professional services, transport, these are all organisations that may have very high standards of safety culture embedded. But as we start conducting assessments within the organisation, we are able to uncover those subcultures, and we're able to talk to them not only about their overall score that may be very good, but where are the areas and what are the priorities that we need to be focusing on for continuous improvement within each of those units. So like I was saying before, and I did mention, the global average safety culture maturity index at the moment is 52%. So there is clearly a lot of opportunity for improvement on the table for organisations to continuously improve and drive their safety culture maturity index up towards proactive and leading safety cultures. So to really summarize that journey that we've been talking about, how we can go, how we support clients to undertake their safety culture and risk improvement journey, it really does begin with the technology, our assessments, and a data-driven approach. We really do believe that the identification of those areas of strengths, those weaknesses, and areas of inconsistency across the organisation, allocating those organisations, allocating that data at a lower level so that we have good performance data on uh, parts of an organization and the subcultures. It really enables boards and executives to gain that transparency that they need to clearly understand where the organization sits and where they need to be focusing on their efforts and their assurance practices to make sure that we are improving the areas that we need to across the business. We're investing our time, resources, and energy in the right focused areas based on some evidence and some data. We know that that process and the allocation of accountability across the organization drives behavioral change. It also helps establish a common language for all people across the business, not just safety professionals, to talk to each other in a common language. They understand what their priorities are. They're empowered with the guidance, the resources, and the supports to improve on those focus areas. And that ownership combined with accountability to improve their safety performance, their safety culture maturity index at a business level really is a scalable and sustainable approach that we are seeing make all the difference to many of our clients. Finally, when we are undertaking that practice over time, we know that it does lead to these enhanced commercial outcomes that we spoke about at the very start of the presentation. We know it reduces those claims and those poor safety outcomes. We know that we're able to demonstrate that and report the lead and the lag metrics to really tell that story over time to the leadership and governance boards. We know it also reduces that risk of regulatory exposure because we know when there is a culture and a commitment to higher standards and performance, that the regulatory aspects are all very judiciously managed through that process. And we are not only trying to aim up towards that minimum safety standard, which is, like I say, the floor. It's the minimum standard that we should be expecting of organizations to perform, not the ceiling. And that's where our program and our technology is able to unlock some of those opportunities to say, we are meeting our compliance, but what else can we do to improve? And how can we guide safety leaders to improve and work with their teams around a commitment to the Deming cycle and that continuous improvement process? And finally, like we spoke about at the start, we obviously know that through that process, we do unlock those stronger commercial performance practices, and they are realized through that process as well. So the one other thing that I would just mention quickly is just based on the success of the safety culture program that we have developed, we know that this process, this methodology, and this technology has supported safety professionals really effectively to address safety culture practices. And we know that for many organizations globally, particularly coming out of Australia where I'm based, psychosocial risk management and incoming regulatory burdens and pressures for effective management of psychosocial risk is a new priority for organizations. And they really do need that support to guide the roadmap to implement a strong and effective psychosocial risk management framework, assessment, and strategy. And that's what our sister product to Safe 365, which we call Orgwell 365, is able to provide for those organizations who are really trying to uncover and tackle some of the newer challenges that are presenting themselves in different markets. So that really brings to an end our discussion for today. I do hope that's given you a bit of an understanding of who we are with Safe 365, some of our frameworks, our methods, and our approaches for how we measure safety culture, and how we can empower you as customers to really take the reins of how you can improve your safety culture sustainably, leveraging our technology to improve and deliver strategies that really make an impact over time. So I might pause there. If anyone does have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm on there, Anthony Bradstreet with Safe 365. You're more than welcome to reach out to me and we can start a conversation that way. and more than happy to answer any questions or provide any guidance we can.